Hey y'all, and welcome to Miles Vexler Reaction. My name is Miles, and Senator Kennedy just bulldozed through the FDIC's wall of silence plus, exposing a government agency flooded with abuse, discrimination, and a climate rule so costly it could melt your wallet faster than the polar ice caps plus. But hey, at least they're sending a message, right? Let's dive in. You are watching Miles Vexler, when truth becomes a liability and cruelty becomes policy. We have crossed the line. Today they stepped right over it. Let's drag that into daylight. Watch the video now.
From Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Romero, I know you've read the Cleary-Gottlieb report. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I watched a lot of powerful people in this town try to cover it up. They said, oh, it's bad, but don't worry. The FDIC chairman will fix it. This was the same FDIC chairman who had been at the agency since God was a corporal and under whom all this stuff happened. And fortunately, that point of view didn't prevail. Here's the way I read the report. 97 people at that agency reported 145 separate incidents of sexual assaults. 91 others reported 141 separate incidents of gender or sexuality-based discrimination. 187 people reported 320 separate incidents of verbal abuse. Over 500 people, about 10% of the people at the agency, came forward about discrimination, harassment, mistreatment they faced at the FDIC. Now, I listened to you say all the right words. And you talked about accountability. And you talked about refurbishing the tarnished reputation of the agency. And you talked about listening. And I appreciate all that. But the phrase that got my attention was, send a clear message that this won't be tolerated. If you want to do that, what you need to do before you do your listening tours or all that other stuff, you need to investigate every one of these allegations, every single one, and find out if they're true. And if they are true, then somebody ought to be, the person who's responsible should be fired, should be sued, and or should be prosecuted. And then you'll have a cleaner agency. Now, I don't have any questions. You're either going to do it or you're not. But I think a lot of the members of the committee agree with me. We're going to be watching. Every time the FDIC comes before the banking committee, as long as I'm on it, I'm going to ask you about progress with specificity. Ms. Crenshaw, this climate risk disclosure rule that you're so proud of, how much is that going to cost the companies that you regulate?
Senator, on a per issuer basis over 10 years, I think the economic analysis was roughly $250,000 to $750,000 on a per issuer basis over 10 years.
What's the total cost, please?
I don't know the total cost.
You have no idea?
Well, it's going to depend very much on the individual issuer.
So you impose this rule on every single entity that you regulate and you don't know the total cost?
Well, Senator, it depends on the individual issuer. We put in place...
You don't know the total cost?
It's going to depend on the individual issuer.
You don't know, do you?
Because it's going to depend. I don't think there's necessarily...
It's going to be billions of dollars, isn't it?
I don't believe on a per issuer basis that it's going to be...
I didn't say per issue. I mean the total cost.
Senator,
it's going to be billions of dollars, isn't it?
I don't know, Senator.
Yeah, it is. And you know it is. how much, after asking all these businesses to spend billions of dollars, how much is that going to lower world temperatures?
I don't know. It's not designed to lower temperatures, Senator. It's designed to give investors information so that they can assess
Why don't
risk.
you just send them an email?
Well, I think there's a lot of securities laws that would prohibit us just sending an email.
Let me be sure I understand. You voted to spend, look, we all want clean air and bright water. You voted to spend, to require the people regulated and the entities regulated by the FDIC billions and billions of dollars, even though you can't say really how much it's going to cost. You're just going to make them do it. And you can't tell me today how much it's going to lower world temperatures?
Again, that's not what the rule is designed for, Senator.
Well, what's it designed for?
It's designed
to harass people?
To give investors information to
Virtue
assess risk,
signaling?
to appropriately allocate their capital as they see fit.
I mean, this is insanity. You have a personal supply chain. Suppose we passed a law that said periodically you've got to report personally the carbon emissions of the people who make all the clothes you buy. You buy clothes, don't you?
I do, Senator.
And the car you drive, and the house you live in, and the food you eat. How much do you think that would cost?
We carved out all of the smaller entities, EGCs, SRCs, from the final rule to ensure that...
If you think everybody ought to report, why don't you make this rule applicable to everybody at the SEC personally and see how they like it?
Again, we carved out the smallest. We took into account the comment file, and we tried
Tell me
to
again how much this
balance
is
it.
going to lower world temperatures. I don't know if I remember asking.
I think you know the answer to that, Senator Kennedy. Thank you.
Zero.
Your time has expired. Senator Cortez Masto recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Crenshaw, unfortunately, you weren't able to answer.
But just when you think the bureaucratic chaos over climate rules couldn't get worse, Senator Kennedy turns the heat up even more. This time, shifting gears to a fiery exchange about prison policy and the rights of biological women. You'll want to see this next moment. Roll the clip.
Senator Klobuchar, Senator Kennedy.
Judge Lee, I don't believe you were truthful in answering Senator Lee's questions. You wrote an article in 2010 entitled An Overview of Special Populations in California Prisons, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And in that article, you argued that male prisoners should be allowed to claim they are transgender in order to be assigned to a female prison, didn't you?
As I said to Senator Lee, that was an article which arose from a symposium, which I just moderated the panel, and then summarized for the symposium edition the different arguments and issues that were raised.
Well, I've read your article, and I don't think that's accurate. You identify certain special populations, transgender people, immigrants, and racial minorities. And you're very critical of the way the California prison system treats them. For example, I'm going to quote here, your words, not mine. The prison system relies heavily on a dichotomous sex-based means of classification. Prisoners are classified by their biological attributes rather than their gender identification. As described by one of the people in the California prison system, the classification process is gender neutral. We really don't distinguish between transgender and non-transgender inmates. Did I read that correctly?
Senator, I don't recall it word by word, but
Here it
think
is.
so. Okay.
And at the end, here's your conclusion. Your words, not mine. In conclusion, because each of these populations, including transgender, traditionally has been marginalized by American society based on their gender, race, ethnicity, or status. They are often further distanced from and marginalized by society upon incarceration. A recent president said you can fairly judge the character of a society by how it treats the weak, the vulnerable, the most easily forgotten. Did you say that?
That's what was written.
Okay. And so, but you're saying your article is just a summary of the opinions of people that you moderated?
I moderated a panel. There were 3 panelists about those different topics. That's what was represented in terms of the issues. And
well, let me just ask you, do you
But
think that a male prisoner convicted in a court of law on a final judgment should be allowed to claim that he is transgender in order to be assigned to a female prison?
Senator, as discussed earlier, the issue of assignment in facilities and such is one which is being actively litigated in California and may become before me. If I were to be
now all of a
confirmed, I would
sudden
do-
you can't answer it. You answered it in your law review article. You
Senator,
were for it. But now you can't answer it? Is that your testimony?
my testimony is that was an article from over 13 years ago, and that as a judge now, and as I have been for nearly the last 5 years, my responsibilities are to fully, faithfully, and
The truth is, you believe that a male prisoner should be able to allow at the sentencing phase to claim that he is transgender in order to be assigned to a female prison. Now, you believe that, don't you?
Senator,
You wrote it.
again, that was a piece which summarized and came out of a symposium edition about the California prison crisis generally.
You found it at Georgetown, the Georgetown Journal of Gender and Sexuality Law Journal, did you not?
At Georgetown, I was one of the founding members. I didn't, of the.
Did you found it? Did you help found it?
I was one of the initial founding group members.
All right, and one of the first articles was entitled, that you picked was entitled, quote, "The Politics of Eradication and Future of LGBT Rights." And in that article, you accused Republicans, or the article you chose, accused Republicans of being influenced by, quote, "a desire to eradicate LGBT identities." Is that accurate?
Senator, I was an articles editor in the first edition.
You don't remember
was
that
over-
article?
I do not recall. I do not know whether or not I edited that.
Okay, well, here's
article.
another article you picked. Quote, here's the title of the article that you picked for your journal. "Gender is fake. The ongoing need for an equal rights amendment." And the article says, quote, "The need for the ERA is more pressing now than ever, given modern conceptions of gender as a social construct." Did I read that right?
Senator, I don't, as I said, I was an articles editor who
Look,
edited.
Senator
articles.
Durbin may save you here, but I don't think you've been honest with this committee, because I've read your writings. And I'd respect you a lot more if you stepped up to the plate and said, "This is what I believe."
I might say to the Senator from Louisiana, my goal is to run the committee and not salvation. I believe the judge can speak for herself.
I'm sure well,
Judge Padilla.
let me say this. Thank you for giving me the extra time.
Judge Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Padilla.
I've been called worse. I do have a question asked the first panel that I intend to ask the second panel, but given the issues and, if I can use air quotes, concerns raised by some of my colleagues, let me try to address the topic at hand. As some of my Republican colleagues have mentioned before,
Senator John Kennedy once again reminded the nation why he's one of the last few in Washington still willing to call out bureaucratic rot by name. In a hearing that went from damning agency neglect to ideological madness, Kennedy lit up the room. and not with rhetoric, but with raw facts and fearless questions. Let's begin with the FDIC debacle. According to a scathing report, under the same leadership that has been in place for decades, nearly 10% of FDIC employees reported mistreatment. Not 10% of a few staffers, 10% of the entire agency. That includes 145 allegations of sexual assault, 141 cases of gender or sexuality-based discrimination, and 320 incidents of verbal abuse. And what was the institutional response? We'll listen, we'll take tours, we'll send a message. Kennedy wasn't buying it. He rightly pointed out that if the message doesn't come with action, real accountability, real consequences, then the rot continues. He wasn't asking for grandstanding, he was demanding that every allegation be thoroughly investigated, and where guilt is found, heads must roll. Someone needs to be fired, someone needs to be sued, someone might even need to be prosecuted. That's not cruelty, that's justice, and more importantly, deterrence. But then the hearing shifted to the climate risk disclosure rule, a regulatory nightmare being pushed under the guise of investor transparency. Kennedy grilled the SEC commissioner on how much this burdensome rule would cost. The answer? Crickets. Well, it depends. You don't know? No. Billions of dollars are about to be vacuumed out of the American economy so the SEC can feel good about being green, yet they don't even know the total price tag. This is regulation without responsibility. It's climate activism wrapped in bureaucratic language and handed to the private sector like a ticking financial time bomb. Kennedy didn't let it go. He asked the one question that these agencies are never prepared to answer: how much will this rule actually lower global temperatures? The answer, again, was, I don't know. Why? Because the rule wasn't even designed to lower temperatures. It's performative. It's a virtue signal. It's government saying, look how good we are, while forcing American businesses to eat the cost. And if that wasn't absurd enough, Kennedy painted the ultimate satire. What if we made the rule personal? What if the very government employees writing these rules had to report their own personal carbon footprint, the emissions of the clothes they wear, the cars they drive, the food they eat? The blank stares on the faces of these officials said it all. The message from Kennedy was simple. If you can't live under the rules you write, you shouldn't be writing them at all. But things took a darker, more ideological turn in the next hearing segment. Kennedy took on Judge Lauren Alicon, a Biden judicial nominee with a history of radical views. Specifically, Kennedy confronted her about a 2010 article she wrote regarding housing biological male prisoners who identify as transgender in women's prisons. You read that right. Judge Alicon claimed her article was just a summary of a symposium, but Kennedy wasn't having it. He had receipts. He read her own conclusions back to her, statements that criticize prisons for classifying inmates by biological sex rather than gender identity. She defended the idea that prison systems should house inmates based on gender self-identification, a dangerous and politically charged stance that prioritizes woke ideology over the safety of female inmates. And now she says she can't answer the question because suddenly it's being litigated. Kennedy rightly pointed out the inconsistency. How can someone write with conviction 13 years ago and now claim to have no opinion as a nominee to a federal bench? Worse still, her ties to Georgetown's Radical Law Journal, which published articles accusing Republicans of trying to eradicate LGBT identities and claiming that gender is fake, raise serious red flags about her impartiality and legal philosophy. And again, she tried to dodge responsibility, suggesting she was merely an editor and not responsible for the views. But Kennedy's challenge was fair. If you didn't believe it, why did you promote it? He concluded with a clear message. Don't try to hide radical ideology behind academic language. Own your views. Be honest with the committee and with the American people. But when nominees show more commitment to ideology than to law, they are not qualified to interpret the Constitution, let alone protect the rights of everyday Americans. From exposing bureaucratic failure at the FDIC to slamming the SEC's climate overreach to dismantling radical gender policy in the courtroom, Senator Kennedy pulled no punches. And thank God for that. Someone in DC still believes in truth, common sense, and accountability. This isn't over, not by a long shot. We've got more to break down in the next episode, including how these hearings could shape future legislation, agency budgets, and judicial confirmations. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss what's coming next. This is Miles, signing off from the Miles Vexler Reaction. Hit that subscribe button, share this with a friend who's sick of the nonsense, and I'll see you in the next one.